Welcome to High Strangeness, where we ask questions and explore all that is strange and unexpected in our reality.
Welcome to High Strangeness. I'm Tony, and this month we are talking about the eerie and strange. Have you ever lived somewhere or moved to a community and it just felt like there was an untold story about that place? Were you hearing whispers, partial sounds, and thought, was that something real? Well, there's a community in Ontario, Canada, that may have a haunted history. And this is, you might wonder, is this a story or is this real, right? Well, there's a book called Haunted Hamilton, and yes, we have the author here today with us to talk all about that. And his name is Mark Leslie. Mark, welcome to the show. Happy to have you. How are you doing?
Oh, hey, Tony. Thanks so much for having me. I'm doing great, actually. Doing quite fantastic. The heat hanging in there, but this is being played in October, so I'm enjoying the coolness of the fall.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, we're sweating for no reason right now. Well, look, you're in the East Coast, right? So tell us where you're at and a little bit about that.
I'm in Waterloo, Ontario, and Waterloo, Ontario is just about an hour northwest of Toronto, which people may have heard of. And we're basically in the same time zone as New York. And Hamilton, Ontario, which is about a 40-minute drive south from where I am in Waterloo, is on the shores of Lake Ontario. It's pretty close to Niagara Falls, right, from the New York border as well when you're crossing there. And Hamilton is like Pittsburgh, steel town. This is where a lot of steel manufacturing happens in Canada. So Hamilton, Ontario is where I had lived for several years from the late 90s through to just 2018. I lived there. I went there to open up a bookstore as a bookstore manager. And I mean, as I was learning about my new city, one of the things I love to do when I go to a new city is I like to go to the breweries. I like to figure out who's making the local beer around here.
That's right.
Get to know those places. I love to go on the ghost walks as well because you get a really great sense of the town because you can't tell a good ghost story without digging into the history. And so that's kind of where I am in the world.
That's so cool. You know, your point about the ghost stories and everything. I recently just interviewed a ghost touring company out here in the West, and they were mentioning the same thing. They said so many times people have shared with them that when they travel, they like to do a lot of these because they get the inside story on the locals there. And
for sure.
Situation.
I remember the first ghost walk I went on was I lived in Ottawa, Ontario for a while. And Ottawa is Canada's capital city. It's it's actually Eastern Ontario, just on the border of Quebec and Ontario. And I'd been there for years. And I remember going on the ghost walks in Ottawa. And it was so funny because all through high school history, the history class I was horrible at memorizing dates and names and like, you know, this declaration was signed here and this treaty was signed there and this happened here and this is when this would. I could never memorize and just regurgitate dates, so I was horrible at history. But history had always been taught like that. When I went on the ghost walk in Ottawa, I learned more about our country's history. I learned about the building of the Rideau Canal. I learned about the railway system across Canada. And that's because several of the ghost stories were really adjacent to people and buildings that were associated with these historic events. And suddenly I learned, oh my God, history's fascinating. When it's not just, memorize and spit out some dates and stuff, that you're actually learning about real people who did really amazing things. And then, of course, some of them died and became ghosts. But I found it was an eye-opening experience for me to go, oh, wow, I can learn a lot about a city. I can learn a lot about the people in the place and the people who came before me or why things are the way they are by going on a ghost walk. It's a really great way to really get a good feel for a place.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's an inside note for people to consider because I don't know if too many people think about that. And Yeah, it seems like a little gem. I mean, hearing this and hearing it from some others, you know, hello, right? I probably should have picked up on it, but as I hear people say it, I'm like, yeah, totally makes sense to me.
Yeah.
Well, more, you've published a bunch of books, 30 or more. I mean, a bunch, right?
Yeah.
You've been doing this for a long time, 30 years and such. That is so cool. And I'm wondering, like, in your portfolio of books, like, is there a main lane that you are in, or is there a number of different things that you do?
I tried to come up with an author tagline, and I thought, well, I've written thrillers and urban fantasy adventures and true ghost story books and horror. So Chills and Thrills was a
Yes.
brand that I adopted. Skulls are really big here. For example, there's more than 36 different skulls in my office here.
Yeah.
They're not real. They're plastic or paintings
But they
or
look
stuff like
great.
that. Yeah, and that was just part of the brand, and I did that as part of. I have a full life size skeleton I take with me, Barnaby Bones, and he comes to author events with me because oftentimes when I'm sitting there, if you see the bald guy sitting there with a skeleton, you do one of two things: you either don't make eye contact with the crazy bald guy, right, or
Yeah.
you see it and go, "Ooh, I bet you he writes my kind of stuff," and they
Right.
gravitate it towards the skeleton. So that's the majority of what I write. Now I also slap I write most of these books under Mark Leslie, but I slap my last name Lefebvre back on, and I write books about the business of writing and publishing for authors. I have about 8 of those, more to come. And I've also written, but these go back to the Mark Leslie name. I've also written these humorous trivia about 80s movies.
Mm.
Nostalgia, Die Hard, Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. And so it's like, well,
Yeah.
there's no chills well, there's maybe some thrills, but
Mm-hmm.
it's more humor. So it's kind of like, it's like, I can't quite stay in that lane.
Yeah.
I'm all over the
Well, I'll tell
highway.
you what. Several of the things you've mentioned right there, I'm like, ooh, I like that. I mean, and I love all '80s, everything '80s. I love. So that's great. In fact, my wife sometimes goes, "Give it a break with the music," because
Oh, well,
you
come
know,
on! I was a DJ in the late '80s, mid to late '80s,
really.
and stuff. So for dances and stuff, not on the radio, and
Hmm.
the cassettes, man, putting doing a dance with cassettes was just. I still
Oh
have
yeah,
all that music.
that was a golden time. Loved it. Well, okay, that's really cool. Thanks for sharing that, and I think that's important, right? Like, I also like the fact that you shared that the other books that you write related to writing and that sort of thing. Because
Yeah,
occasionally I hear from some people that are like they really like when I talk to authors to see how their path, how they got to what they do. So this is
yeah,
great that you do that because people you can check some of his books out there and just learn a little bit
yeah,
about that as well.
for
That's
sure.
great. So okay, Mark Hamilton, you kind of told us where it was at. Can you give us a little more history on Hamilton?
Yeah, so again, Hamilton is a city in southeastern Ontario, mid southern Ontario, and it's located on Lake Ontario, and it is a steel town. It wasn't always a steel town. I didn't know that until I started researching
Mm.
the Ontario, because it was Hamilton. That's where they process all the steel, and I grew up in a mining community, 5 hour drive north,
Hmm.
and we would ship all the nickel and all the stuff, and they would go get made into steel in Hamilton. But lo and behold, it had been a textile, and it had other industries. And I only learned about this
It's
through the
crazy.
ghosts,
Hmm.
and again, a lot of significant historical events happened in and around Hamilton, including a war between our two nations, the War of 1812. As well, where we were fighting with the British, and and a lot of that happened in the Hamilton Stony Creek area, right? As you're
Yeah.
closer in upstate New York and things like that. So a lot of the stories and a lot of the history in the graveyards and the Stony Creek battlefield are places that take us back to those days and the history. And so Hamilton is a city that is often looked down upon or poo-pooed a lot of people look down their nose. Oh, this, it's blue collar workers and steel
Mhm.
town and stuff like that. I read an article just a few years ago that equated Hamilton to being something like New York's Brooklyn, where
Really?
it was suddenly more affordable. So a lot of people who worked in Toronto couldn't afford to buy properties there, so they were coming out to Hamilton. And it's true, like, living in Hamilton and then taking the commuter train into Toronto to work, because I could afford to buy a house in Hamilton, but I couldn't afford
Right.
to buy even a one bedroom condo in Toronto. So it had this bad rap, but then it also got this sort of, it's a cool place like Brooklyn, and people are,
Yeah.
it's a bedroom community for people who work in Toronto, but it's so much more. It's got a vibrant art and culture. There's an arts crawl that happens in the
Hmm.
summer times, right? One night every week, and they have musicians and artists and stuff like that, and then they do super crawl where they actually shut down one of the main streets downtown for about 6 blocks. They have multiple stages set up, vendors, food,
Whoa.
music, art, books, and they call it super crawl. And it is an absolute celebration of music, arts, culture. It's just a really great family
That
friendly
sounds cool.
celebration. I mean, stuff going on during the day. At night, that's when the partying and the music and stuff gets a little bit, less family friendly. But Hamilton has such a beautiful and rich, vibrant essence to it, and so many cool communities. So again, sounds like I'm trying to sell the city, and I don't live there anymore. I live about almost an hour away, but I still love Hamilton. I still fell in love with Hamilton. This book, Haunted Hamilton, was the first ghost story book I've ever written. My
Hmm.
first, where I researched ghost stories, and I explain this a little bit in the introduction of the book, but I call it my love letter to the city of Hamilton.
Hmm.
It really felt like I was getting to really know the city I had adopted, and moved to and started to raise a family in. And it was kind of like, yeah, I like this place.
Yeah. So yeah, okay. And because that was going to be my next question is, how did you zero in on doing this book about that location?
Yeah,
And it sounds like you started to really have an affinity and a feel for
yeah.
all things Hamilton.
Well, I'll give you the insider story of how the book happened. So
Hmm.
my wife and I had moved. We were living in Ottawa where we had met, and she was from Hamilton, and I was from Sudbury, and we wanted to be close to either my family or her family, and it was kind of, where are we going to move? So we
Yeah.
picked Hamilton because there was a bookstore. I applied for a job to be a manager. It was like a big box store, like a Barnes and Noble. I was the
Hmm.
product manager for Chapters and Castor, and so we moved to Hamilton. And I went on the ghost walks because I wanted to learn more about the city. The craft breweries weren't a thing back then, but they did have local beer, a Lakeport. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go buy the local beer and I'm going to check out the stuff that's made in the city, all that
Yeah.
local pride. And I went on the ghost walks as well. And I was talking to the ghost walk people because Daniel and Stephanie were the couple that were running it. I said, your stories are so amazing. You've got such rich stuff. And me being a writer and a bookseller, I said, you guys really should put this into a book. This would be amazing. And they said, oh, we're too busy running this business. He said, but if you're a writer, if you want to do something, we'll give you access to our files. And I was like, so I put that in my back pocket thinking, well, I've never
Yeah.
written a nonfiction book of ghost stories. But then in my role as a bookseller, I was on a board of directors for a place called BookNet Canada. It's kind of like Nielsen BookScan, or the ratings system for, it was a company that helped with data, helped publishers and booksellers and librarians with understanding the book industry. And one of the other people who was on the board was the vice president of Dundurn, Canada's largest independent press, in Toronto. And during a break at a board meeting, I overheard her say, "We've always wanted to publish a book of ghost stories about Hamilton." And so,
Mm.
knowing that I had access to details with Daniel and Stephanie, knowing that there was a publisher interested in this, and then as a bookseller, I researched and was like, there are no books like this.
Wow.
So there's
It's
a
coming
need.
together.
There's a need for a market, and it's the Venn diagram, right? And I do a Venn diagram when I think about a book. I'm like, okay, this is one group of people are people who like ghost stories. Okay, that's one group. Other group of people are people who like history, because again, can't tell a good ghost story without a little bit of history. And then the
Right.
third group of people, and again, where they all overlap is perfect. Third group of people are people who are just really proud of their city, that they love anything about Hamilton. So if all those are true, that's my ideal reader. It doesn't mean that other people won't enjoy it, but that's the target audience. So
That's the target. Yeah.
I put my pitch together. I wrote a one-page letter saying, hey, here's the title, Haunted Hamilton, the Ghosts of Dundurn Castle and Steeltown Shivers. And I know Dundurn, the publishing company, was named after Dundurn Castle in
Mm.
Hamilton, because I knew the owner who'd founded Dundurn, it's 50 years ago now, was a huge fan of Dundurn Castle. So I was like, if I put Dundurn Castle in there, that'll appeal to that. And it was so funny because I sent this pitch off, and then I heard back from them within a few weeks. And normally, when you send something to a publisher, you hear back months later, and it's like a thanks, but no thanks.
Right.
It's not you, it's me. That kind of stuff. No, it's you, really. That's the thing that normally happens. But they wrote back and said, we'd love to publish this. In fact, and because normally the publishing world is like several years out, right?
Yeah.
You sign a contract, and it's either next year or the year after the book comes out. He said, if you can get us this manuscript in the next month, we'll publish it in the fall catalog. We actually have a spot. And I went,
Wow.
oh, I better write this book. And so
Yeah.
I took a
Overdrive.
week. Yeah, I took a week off work and went, okay, got to write, got to research, got to get this book to them. And that's kind of how Haunted Hamilton happened. It was like all these things lined up at the
Yeah.
right time, and the opportunity hit.
That's so cool. That's a really cool story to see how it all started to fall together in the right way. And I mean, it was a little bit of work there for you, real quick. You had to kind of push through it to get through it, but that sounds great. Yeah. Now it's really cool because did I cut you off? Were you going to say something?
Well, I was going to say the reality is, yeah, it takes 6 months or a year to write a book, but it really takes 5 solid days.
Wow.
About a week,
Yeah. That's good. I guess you're just all in for that week.
Oh, I was
And
all
just,
in. It was like
yeah.
12-hour days and stuff just to get it done. But and that's usually what happens when I sign a contract. I've got, I got a year to write the book, and then the last couple of weeks is like, okay, go to town. Let's go. Nothing like a deadline to motivate me.
Right. Well, it is interesting because you have a number of chapters, a number of stories in there, and then you had access to the files from that couple,
Yeah.
Was
yeah.
it hard to really determine what to use and what you wanted to, or did it come, was there a process of thinking where you said, here's how I'm going to put this thing together?
I was learning as I went because I'd never done this before.
Mm-hmm.
So what I did is I would start with a subject based on one of their stories, one of their like tours or whatever, notes I'd taken, articles I'd gotten photocopies of, chapters from books, interviews with people, whatever it was, right? I had all these bits and pieces and scattered all over the place. And so I would say, okay, Dundurn Castle, what do I have on Dundurn? Get all the things, bring them together. Now read them. And then what are we going to say about Dundurn? And then and even in cases of, okay, it's very interesting for some readers to understand the type of architecture and the style. And so getting some of those details, who built it, when did they start it, what was the petitioning like for the city to get the permits and all, like whatever it was, right? So there's all this background stuff that's not even about the ghosts. It's just setting the scene.
Right.
And then if I had enough information, I would write a chapter. And I'll give you an example of a chapter I did not write. I had encountered one or two ghost stories, very sort of anecdotal things, like, oh, they're laughing coming from this one room, and someone thought they saw something in a mirror once, or whatever. It was like just whatever about this hospital for the insane on Hamilton Mountain. But I didn't have enough to write a chapter. Now I'm jumping ahead to a book I released several years later, is I was at an event. So Haunted Hamilton was already published. I'm at an event at a library in Hamilton. And again, it's Halloween time, so people want to hear ghost stories and stuff. So I'm sharing some ghost stories. I'm doing my presentation. And there's a guy who's there, and he comes up and he gets one of my books signed, and he waits till there's no one around. He says, "Listen, I got to tell you a story." And what? He goes, "There's that hospital, in this neighborhood that is, it's been abandoned." He's just like, "I worked there as a security guard back in the '80s." And
Whoa.
he told me a story about what happened to him at that hospital and why he quit his job and never went back again. And I'm madly scribbling. And that
Yeah.
story did not make it into Haunted Hamilton, but it made it into Haunted Hospitals. So
Nice.
it's kind of like,
Nice.
well, why didn't you write about that hospital in Haunted Hamilton? Well, I didn't have enough to make a chapter. But once I
Yeah.
got enough, it was like, what am I going to do with this? Well, I'm working on a book on hospitals. Well, that works. And if I ever do a revised version of Haunted Hamilton, then I can include that story, right? Or
Yeah.
other stories that I found out about. Because again, I wrote about a haunted library or a haunted place, and then sometimes when I'm at an event, someone goes, "Oh, I had an experience." I'm like, "Oh man,
Hmm.
if only I could just go and add it into my chapter."
I know, right? That's a great tidbit for potential writers or writers out there is don't get rid of your information. Like if you catch something, right, you probably put that aside,
Oh,
cataloged it and said, oh, I'm going to come back to that. Hey there. If you haven't already subscribed, hit the like button and please do so. It really helps a young channel like this grow and improve. Thanks, and let's get back to the show.
yeah, there's file folders, like all kinds of like file folders with just like a few lines of notes of stuff that happened, and then if I can add to it, then that becomes a chapter maybe later on in another book.
Yeah. So through all of this with Hamilton, was there any historical events that really surprised you that maybe you uncovered or just something happened? Or I mean, I guess that hospital is one example because you
Yeah,
heard a personal story of a guy who was freaked out by.
yeah.
But so maybe that's the answer. But I was just questioning if there was stuff like that that you were like, whoa.
Well, you know what? One of the stories, and it was one of the ones that frightened me the most when I was researching it, was a story, and I called it the Tombstone Ghost. And that the title almost gives away where the ghost originates,
Mhm.
because it happens in this apartment in a building where a man wakes up in the middle of the night to this screaming, and his wife is laying in bed beside him, and she's screaming at the top of her lungs, and she's
Wow.
staring frozen at the ceiling. And he finally snaps her out of it and says, "What's going on?" She goes, "I woke up and there was this woman, like looked like a hag with this scraggly hair and these deep sunken eyes, and like this mouth that seemed like it was howling. She was howling and in
Mm.
agony, and she was hovering right over me. And when she opened her eyes, she saw it, and then when she screamed, the ghost disappeared off into this corner, like zipped off to the wall.
Yeah.
And this kept happening over and over and
Oh,
over.
wow. Over. Yeah.
And I found out about this because when I always go, the archivists at the library are my best friends. I would go to the local archivists at the library and say, "Hey, I'm working on a book of ghost stories about Hamilton. What do you got for me?" And they love a
Yeah.
challenge. They're like, let's
Yeah.
go get you some stuff. And she brought me this big practical box of newspaper article photocopies and all kinds of clips and bits and bobs about hauntings.
What a
And
gold
one of
mine.
them was this Hamilton Spectator article, and there was an artist rendition of this creepy, scary woman who kept appearing over and over and over. And that image is there. I've there got a photo because I couldn't take them away. I had to make copies of copies and brought them home as I was doing my research. I remember working on this chapter and looking at the sketch and just imagining opening my eyes and seeing that. Now, I'll share the rest of the story because I want to get you to where the tombstone comes
Yeah.
into play. So there's these articles in the Spectator. It got so bad They ended up bringing in the psychic investigators and a priest to try and bless the place, and a medium who's going to try and communicate to figure out what this ghost wants, because she keeps appearing over the bed and then disappears off to this one wall. And you can only see the top half of her body. It's like she doesn't have any legs as well. That was another distinctive feature about her.
Weird.
They finally brought in these investigators and a medium and an exorcist and all of these things. Even some paranormal investigators from the U.S. came in for this,
Wow.
and it was documented in the papers, and they could kind of figure out there was some sort of trauma happened to this woman, and they weren't sure much about her, but they had some details and potential names, and she's mourning. There's a mournful feel, and blah 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 blah. Anyways, they eventually move out of that apartment, and the ghost stays. No one else seems to see the ghost. There's no other documentation of that, but the ghost at least leaves them alone, and they live their lives. 10 years later, the building is torn down, and in the wall, the same wall that she disappeared into, was a tombstone. There was a partial name on the tombstone of a
Wow.
woman who had been injured so badly in an accident that her legs were paralyzed, so she was in a wheelchair, explaining the top half of her body. It was the tombstone of her children who had died that was in that wall, and I think she wanted to free them from that. So she was almost like she was trying to lead them to the wall where the tombstone was hidden. And so
Wow.
it was so cool to see this series of articles about this haunting that they brought in an exorcist for. And then to see years later the guy holding a piece of the tombstone that they found in the building he used to live in, going, "This is why it was haunting us." And that's the kind of stuff that you go, it's scary, definitely a
Yeah.
scary situation, but it's also very sad. And you realize that this is the spirit of a woman who had a purpose. Like there was a reason why she kept returning,
Yeah.
and maybe a sense that maybe this other woman could help her because she's a mother, that kind of thing, right?
Right. Wow. That's really, I mean, I'm going to use the word cool story, but not so much for a lot of the participants, right? But
Yeah,
what
yeah.
an interesting story. Wow.
But that was one of the ones, you didn't expect. What I didn't expect was to find it documented in a mainstream newspaper. Now,
Yeah.
newspapers in the 1890s, right, and the early 1900s. Oh my God, there were columns like where people just shared ghost stories of true ghost stories. That
Really?
things. It was just common. You'd look at, if you go and look at any archives of newspapers from, like, 1890, 1910, somewhere in that realm. Everyone's talking about ghosts. Like, it's just there's just like a sports column. Oh, here are the ghosts. Here are the hauntings.
Wow.
It was a comment. It was just like, here's the arts and entertainment. Here's the sports, and here's the ghosts. It just seemed to be
Wow.
so common, but this was like, 70s, 80s, and it was not common. And it was so fascinating to find a story like that in mainstream media. The only other one that was in the Hamilton Spectator was a ghost at Dundurn Castle, and
Hmm.
the wedding guest, and it's related to the tale of the couple that had built and owned Dundurn Castle, and their daughter who was very ill and couldn't get out much, and so was often stuck in her room while all the other kids were out playing and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
she died before she got to the age where you would get married and have a family and stuff like that. And Dundurn is a beautiful estate. Lots of wedding parties go there to get their pictures taken. And in one photo that was published in the Hamilton Spectator, you can see that her looking out the window from a room that was not occupied, and it
Holy
looks a
cow.
lot like this daughter who had died. And that was another one where you're like, ooh, that's interesting. They're sharing
Yeah,
this
that
ghostly tale.
yeah, that is. And you got yeah, and you love it when there's a picture or something like that that they've
Yeah.
yeah, that just makes it all the more spooky and just makes you think. Jeez.
Yeah, and again, those were kind of stories that I was not expecting to find them written about seriously in mainstream media.
Right.
Because a lot of times when you talk about ghost stories, then it's in hushed tones, and you don't want to say it too loud, and people are going to think there's
Right.
something wrong with you. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I was going to ask you at some point is, was there one that you found personally chilling? But it sounds like that was it, right? That was that,
Yeah.
and the tombstone ones were those where you go, whoa,
Well,
crazy.
there was another one at the Dundas Library, and this was interesting because this is a beautiful. They've now relocated to a bigger facility. There's a beautiful historic building in Dundas, which is on the outskirts of Hamilton. And one of the stories I just kept encountering and finding was like the haunted elevator. It's only a three-story, the basement, main floor, and then the second floor. And the elevators were constantly uh, misbehaving and just going up and down on their own. No one was there. They couldn't figure it out. The only again, it didn't matter how many different companies they brought in to look at, like they couldn't figure out what was wrong with the elevators. But it had started to happen after they found these historic tombstones of this man and wife who had lived on this estate where this historic building. When they put the tombstones there on the main floor of the library, right there by the elevator, and so that was the thing, and they figured because they spelled Marin, the woman's name, wrong, and it was almost like maybe she's like getting them back because she's permanently remembered with the wrong spelling of her name. But
Yeah.
so I'm there again near Halloween to share some stories, and the staff who've already read the book are like, yeah, it happens, still happens. I'm like, really? Yeah, it's like we still can, like all these years later, it's still happening. So we're upstairs. The library is actually closed. It's a special event, so people who wanted to come in are checked in at a certain time. The library's closed, locked now. It's just the public is upstairs. We're upstairs in the children's section because there's places where people can sit and I can stand there and I can share some stories. And as I'm sharing the story about that location, I shared some stories and start talking about the elevator. In the middle of telling the story, the elevator dings. And we can't see it from where we are in the children's section, but one of the staff members, she's standing there and she looks over. She can see the elevator. She sees that it opens and she just nods at me like this. Yep, see, told you it happens. and that kind of freaked everyone out, and that was so cool. So
Yeah.
I got some pictures of. I brought Barnaby with me. I've got me and Barnaby. Or the staff were holding Barnaby in front of the tombstones and by the elevator, and it's so rare when you write about something because I've not experienced 99% of these things. Right? You go
Yeah.
on the ghost walks, you go to the place, you see the location, but it's the when you actually experience it, you go, "Oh, okay, that's
Right.
cool and creepy."
Right.
And now we're all going
That,
to get in the elevator to go down.
yeah. That is a cool story. I like that. Yeah. And it kind of, one of the questions I was also going to ask you is, when I do this, all the crazy things that I do in the podcasting, people like to they wonder, what have you experienced? So I'm
Yeah.
curious for you, that's that elevator story. Very interesting. That's an account, right? Any other experiences that you've personally had with any
Yeah.
of this strange kind of stuff?
So it's really funny. So Haunted Hamilton came out 13 years ago, and I've written 6 other true ghost story books since then, and I'm working on another one. But up until maybe only about 8 years ago, I used to be able to say, nope, nothing like that's ever happened to me. Thank God, because I'm a big chicken. I probably would have to change my pants, change my diaper. You know what I mean? Because I'm just a big chicken. That's all there is to it. Thank God, I've never encountered that. And then lo and behold, I've had 2 different experiences, both at hotels,
Hmm.
ironically. And so the more interesting story was my wife and I were traveling down to a writers' conference in Orlando, Florida, from up here in Ontario. So that's quite a hike. And we
Hmm.
decided because we were working on a book of haunted bars and breweries together because we met at a brewery and thought, okay, this is cool. We decided to do a tour. It takes several days to drive down to Orlando and stop in at these haunted locations, and then on the way back, we did it in 2 days. And the first day, the 14-hour drive, we knew we wanted to stop in Weston, West Virginia, to go to the Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum
Hmm.
in Weston, West Virginia. It was about a little more than halfway, and I had just co-authored a book called Haunted Hospitals with Rhonda Parrish. Now, when you co-author a book, you decide, okay, you can do this, you'll do this chapter, this topic, and I'll do this one. So we split them up. So that was one of Rhonda's chapters. So apart from proofreading, I didn't have all the research that she had. So
Right.
all I knew about it was what Rhonda had written. So I was like, this will be so cool to go hold a copy of the book up, get some pictures in front of the building. We can use it for promotional purposes, and then we can go on the tours because they had tours of this place. So so Liz and I are driving up, and it's 1 a.m. by the time we get there. Through the mountains and the fog, and
Mm.
tired. And it was like, okay, we're close to where we need to be. Let's stop in at this next hotel. We pull in, and like the parking lot is just packed. So she pulls up because she's driving. I run in. Have any rooms? Nope. It was like, oh man,
Mm.
yeah. Any other hotels? Like, yeah, just another few miles up the highway. There's a Econo Lodge. Maybe they've got something. I was like, all right. So get back in the car and we go, and we get to it, and the Econo Lodge parking lot is jam packed. And I pull in. I'm like, oh, this isn't looking good.
Yeah.
And I run in and say, do you have any rooms? And they say, yeah, but and the suspenseful music plays. But it's only 2 double beds. Like, that's all we have. We have a room with 2 double beds. No queen, no king, whatever is like. I don't care. We just want, as Neil Page says in Planes, Trains, and Automobiles, 4 wheels and a seat. Right. That's all I
Yeah.
want. Just rent
That's
me a
right.
car. And it's like, just a room that closes, has a bathroom and some place to sleep. I'm good to go.
Yeah.
So we check in. Liz takes the bed beside the bathroom. I take the bed beside the door. And she puts a hoodie on, rolls it up, and she rolls over and she's out. I'm a chicken. I'm scared of the dark. We're going on a ghost tour the next day, so it takes me a while to fall asleep. I finally fall asleep, and I wake up, and I hear Liz getting walking around the bed. I look up and I see her moving towards the bathroom, and I'm laying there and I'm waiting for her to turn the bathroom light on,
Hmm.
and I'm waiting, and I'm waiting, and I don't hear anything anymore.
Oh no.
And then all of a sudden, I hear a snore from the bed beside me. And I look over, and Liz is in bed. And I
Oh
sit
no.
up and I go, oh my God, there's a woman walking around in here. I just saw a woman go around the side of Liz's bed and towards the washroom. And so I grab my phone, get the light on, looking around. There's no one in the room. I check the door's still locked. And I'm like, oh my God, what was that? So I've woken Liz up before when I've gotten scared. I've learned not to do that. Don't do that. Because I'm like, oh, there's a boogeyman. You got to save me. I don't do that
Yeah.
anymore. I know my lesson. Don't do that to her. So I'm like, I'm not waking her up. I think about this logically because, again, as an investigator of ghostly things, I'm always looking for an explanation as to what
Sure.
this was, and do physics explain this, whatever. In this particular case, I'm thinking, okay, this could happen. I wake up, I'm laying on my back, I see Liz go to the washroom, and then I fall asleep for 5 minutes, and I open my eyes. 5 minutes have passed, but I think half a second has passed. That happens to
Right.
us all the time. Time is
Yeah.
weird when you're in a sleep state. She had already gotten out of the washroom, gone to bed. I opened my eyes, and that's what happened. I didn't see anything. It was just Liz. No big deal. Go to sleep, Mark, you big chicken. So I finally fell asleep again. And then I hear this clatter of something on the desk, where the TV is, the table where the TV is, where
Hmm.
my laptop bag is, where our passports are. And I'm like, oh my God, someone's going through my stuff.
Right.
And again, I sit up and I grab the light from my flashlight on my phone. I'm looking. There's no one there. And I check the door. Again, the door is latched. And then I check the door between the rooms. No, it's locked, right? Just in case someone come and go from there.
Sure.
And I was like, oh my God, what was this? And then I think, okay, wait a second. Someone upstairs just dropped something. And it sounded like it was in my room. That happens all the time in hotel rooms. So again, I convinced myself to get to sleep. And I'm happy camper. So the next morning, we're showering, getting ready, getting packed up to go on this tour, which we're excited about. And I said, "Oh man, I was up several times last night because I kept hearing things and stuff." And I was like, "How about you?" Like she's like, "Oh no, I didn't get out of bed once. I slept through the whole night."
Oh
And
my.
I said, "No, you went up and went to the washroom." And she's like, "No, I didn't get out of bed once last night."
Oh
And I
no.
was like, "No, you really?" She's like, "No, I was out and and so I tell her what I saw. And
Yeah.
then so here's the thing is I'm a believer and Liz is this very, very skeptical of
Hmm.
everything. Her face goes completely white. And she says, "Well, I thought this was a dream, but in the middle of the night, I woke up and it felt like someone was standing over me. And
Oh my.
I knew it wasn't you. Someone else was standing over me. And then I felt a hand touch my shoulder. And it was a woman's hand on my shoulder." So Liz, being a feisty person, she steels herself up and she's ready to take a swing at whoever's broken into her
Sure.
room. No one's there. And she was convinced a woman was standing over her and put her hand on her shoulder. I was convinced I heard and saw a woman walking around her bed. Neither one of us could explain what we experienced independently. And if we hadn't shared with one another, that would have just been a weird thing that happened. But now
Right.
you're like, was there a woman trapped in this room trying to contact us, to reach us, to, I don't know, like, was she lonely? Like, what's the
Hmm.
deal? And so that was a really interesting experience that I just can't explain, and I have to assume was potentially the spirit of a woman who's haunting that hotel room.
Yeah. And then the account that your wife explains just locks that into that strange, like you were saying, you had told yourself what you saw.
Yeah,
And then all of a sudden she just flipped that
but
by,
she experienced something similar, right? Like she
yeah.
experienced a woman engaging with her in a different way, and I was like, well, that's weird.
Yeah. Holy cow. Wow, Mark. That one, yeah, that's a situation where it makes up for not having a bunch of other ones because that one is
Yeah.
unforgettable. My
That
goodness.
one is really we still talk about it, and again, she's still, I mean, less of a skeptic than she used to
Right.
be because she wants the concrete proof, right? Whereas I'll go with the feeling and the emotion. And
Yeah, and
so
that's what makes it so much more powerful is that she approaches it one way, you another way, but you both had this thing happen. Crazy.
yeah, it was a really, really strange
Wow.
experience.
Thanks for sharing that. That's cool. That's a perfect story to
Yeah,
share in this case. You know, with your book, you is there is there a way you approach the information where did you start at one part of the town and go to the other, or was there some reason or rationale for how you went
yeah. No,
chapter by chapter?
that's a great question, and in some of my other books, I have done that where
Mhm.
I break it up by region or theme, a type of location. This one, I was just kind of just saying, "Well, this feels good here.
Sure.
This feels good there." The only thing I did purposely is at the very end. At the very end, I have the conclusion, obviously, and then I have a look at the haunted Hamilton people.
Yeah.
So that was kind of a just a look at the people behind it because they were so generous to me. I thought, well, at least the people who read this book, if they haven't gone on a ghost walk, let's let them learn more about the ghost group. And so that was the other thing, and then of course for further reading as well. So I also had here are some of the books I researched, and here are other websites if you want more information. Go check that out. Those are the only things I very strategically said that has to go at the end.
Hmm. Gotcha.
All the rest of it was just kind of feel, right? And
Sure.
it's this one. So I opened up with the custom house, which is one of the buildings where that's where I learned about the textiles and all the other history of what this building had been before it became this arts institution that it is today. And obviously I needed to do Dundurn Castle early in the book because the promise in the subtitle that we're going to talk about this. And so Dundurn Castle, by the way, has ties to the royal family in England. And so Charles and
Wow.
Camilla, I guess King Charles now, but Prince Charles and Camilla had come to Dundurn Castle because there was some don't know the relation, but there is a connection to the royal family at this location. So
Very
it's
neat.
a beautiful estate. And it was built on the shore, like on the hill overlooking the shores of Lake Ontario. And as you're coming around the corner, sort of from the Toronto area, it was meant to impress the crap out of people as they came and saw this beautiful sprawling estate on the hills that just kind of overshadowed everything. And that's the cool thing. I mean, like Dundurn, like this is a massive thing now because the city's built up around it. It's not the biggest thing, but
Hmm.
it's still pretty spectacular when you're
Yeah, that is cool. I did see some
coming around
pictures.
to
I
look
thought
at
that
it.
was cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Mark, 21 chapters is what I think I saw. And you've covered a couple of things I wanted to ask you about. And Custom House, Dundurn Castle. Can I ask you about two or three more that you can just
Yeah, of course.
share a
Yeah.
little bit about?
If I remember.
Yeah, that's true because you wrote this a
The book
while
came
ago.
out 13 years ago. So it's
Yeah,
like, oh, I
yeah.
remember that story. Yeah.
How about Whitehern Mansion? Do you remember anything about that one?
Whitehern Mansion. So this, and it's kind of funny. I ended up living near Whitehern before I moved out of Hamilton. I had an apartment down near Whitehern, a beautiful building right down, like in downtown Hamilton. And this was a beautiful mansion, and it's still gorgeous. And they still have tours, and they still keep up the flowers and stuff like that. But it was the McQuestons, I think, that did medicine in this building back in
Okay.
the day. And if I remember, it was Mary McQueston who ended up having to raise the family alone because of people didn't live the way we do
Yeah,
today.
yeah.
And so she ended up getting cancer, and then it got handed to the city of Hamilton. But one of the things is Mary is often seen and sometimes heard in Whitehern Mansion by some of the staff recording,
Hmm.
hearing a woman's. I think it's hearing a woman's singing because she was often
Interesting.
fond of music, and so sometimes there's that presence that they will sometimes hear in the house, which is Mary.
That's
And
cool.
they believe it's potentially her voice. There's no radios on or anything going on. They just can hear walking upstairs, and some just hear this low singing that's coming from up there, and they think, well, that's just Mary. She's just doing her thing.
It's like an echo from the past, right, or something?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Yeah, not
yeah,
very spooky, but still eerie, I guess.
yeah. I
Yeah.
love that. A couple more. How about Tivoli Theater? Tivoli? I
Ah,
don't
the
know if I'm saying
Tivoli,
that right. Tivoli?
Tivoli Theater. So only half of that building still stands today.
Mm,
And the Tivoli Theater was associated with a few interesting things, like a disappearance of some that's never of Ambrose Small that was never solved.
oh, wow.
But the Tivoli was also a location where they would see sometimes people up in the audience, the ghostly specter watching rehearsals when there was nobody up there. Sometimes the voices, and I think the Tivoli had a story. I think this was a story where there was something hidden in the wall. Was that the Tivoli? I'm trying to remember now as I go
Mm,
back to as I'm trying to quickly get to the Tivoli Theater. But Ambrose Small is definitely the mystery of the disappearance of Ambrose Small is probably one of the biggest ones. The renovations, yeah. Oh, and that was where the trunk was found that related back to Ambrose Small. That trunk, so that's
wow.
why it connected back to that. But there was, yeah, I could have sworn there was something having to do with a ghostly boy,
Hmm.
and it was always associated with this one statue on one of the walls. I'm trying to remember that, but that's one of the ones. I guess I would have to go and look that up and find the
That's
details.
okay. That's okay. You know, it is interesting how there are stories of things in walls, right? Like,
Yeah.
I hear some of that every now and then. I'm like, Whoa. It's freaky. That's just freaky. Because
Yeah, yeah,
it's right on the other side of the wall sometimes in an older
yeah,
home. You don't even know it.
yeah. And the wall,
Yeah.
this wall wasn't there back then,
Hmm.
or
Yeah.
whatever. And that's why I remember in some of the places, I've heard some of the ghost stories. I've never made it into a book yet, but there was a place I would stay in, Lincoln City, Oregon, and this old hotel. And they would sometimes see a ghost just kind of disappear into the floor as if they were going downstairs, and that's
Hmm.
because the stairs are now blocked off with a room. But that used to
Yes.
be the main staircase that they would use to get up and down to the second floor, and that's why it was like, why is the ghost disappearing into the floor and moving forward like little by little by little? Well, the ghost is walking down the stairs that are still there for
Yeah.
them, but not for you.
Right. It's almost, that's the neat thing about this sometimes. It's like there's a veil that you get to see
Yeah,
through. It's like, maybe reality's veil is so thin that you're seeing just,
yeah.
the shadow of that. It's
Yeah, are
crazy.
you seeing into the past? Are you seeing into another world? Is time relative, right? Where it's
Hmm.
still the same time, just a different reality in that same space.
Right.
Is a haunting like a cathode ray tube that has an impression burned into it, so you can still see it,
Right.
right? Or is it the spirit of the departed? Like, so the thing is, what I love about ghosts is we don't really know for sure. We only have
Right.
theories.
I think that's the amazing thing about this is there's a lot of people paying attention to this stuff now. I
Yeah.
mean, there has been for a long time, but it seems like more the use of technology trying to figure it out, and we're
Yeah.
still clueless.
No, no, I know. I mean, when you think about technology, I think about like one of the very first ghost pictures ever taken.
Hmm.
Was it Lord? You know who I'm the gentleman in the library,
Yes, yes, yes.
and it was back in the day when to do a photo you would set it up and it needed to be exposed for a good several minutes.
Hmm.
And this is a library shot where the dead guy is half of his body seen in the chair, and it could potentially be explained if somebody walked quickly into the room, sat down for
A brief
a,
second.
a
Yeah.
couple minutes and then got up and left, that would leave somewhat of a ghostly impression there. But it was just a weird, that was another case where I think he had died and broken his legs and you only see the top half of his body. That seems to be a
Mm.
common theme I've come up with in ghost stories, is something having to do with the way the person died, or the physicality of their body transcends into the spirit form and is represented in some symbolic way.
Yeah. Yeah, I think so. Because yeah, in their mind, wherever they're at that space, there's still something wrong with their wholeness. Something's
Yeah.
not right about it. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel I'm 56 now, but I still feel very similar to the way I felt when I was 17. Now, when I get up and out of up and down from a chair, and the noises I make and stuff is like, I'm definitely not 17 anymore. When I was just hiking a mountain a few days ago, I was like, I'm not 17 anymore, but I still
Right.
feel like that
Yeah,
because
up
most of
here,
my life
right?
I felt this way, right?
Yeah. I know I have that shock every time I look in the mirror.
Like old
hear
guy.
some
Yeah.
good music that you like, you're young again, muscles start inflating, and then you look in the mirror and go, no.
No, that was a long time ago. That was.
Yeah. Man, Mark, this has been great. I really appreciate you taking some time and sharing really this cool story in this book. And I think people should pick it up. It's a perfect thing to read during the holiday or the Halloween time frame or any time. But it'll definitely send a shiver up your back. That's for sure. So, Mark, do you have any projects you're working on now? Like what's going on? I know you're probably always working on something.
I am. I'm always working on in fiction. I'm working on the next book in my Canadian werewolf series. It's a dark humor urban fantasy. It starts with a Canadian werewolf in New York and it includes books like Fear and Longing in Los Angeles, Fright Night's Big City, Hex and the City, and the latest in that series is Only Monsters in the Building. So all the titles are kind of a riff on something that sounds familiar, just
Hmm.
playing with a little bit, sort of that parody aspect, because there is humor in it. But I am working on for a different publisher from Hamilton, actually, Woolsack and
Hmm.
Wynne. I'm working on a book called Ghosts of the Great Lakes. And
Oh,
I
wow.
turned that novel into them in December of this year, and it will be out next fall in time for the spooky season. And
Perfect.
so that's going to be
Yeah.
a lot of fun because it's all going to be ghosts of, Lake Ontario and Lake Erie and Lake Superior and Lake Michigan and all of the others, that sort of area. So there'll be something for, I guess, a lot of people who live in those areas or the tourists who come to those areas. That book will probably be something they'll enjoy.
Yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, sounds like you have some fun stuff on deck here and then I'll probably be reaching out to you down the road because I think some of this would be a lot of fun to just
Yeah,
to catch up on it.
I would like that. Thank you.
Yeah. So, how can people find your books and follow your work? Is there any social
Sure.
media sites or anything that people can link into?
Yeah, you go to markleslie.ca and there's links to all my social media, YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the places. You can also, if you're interested in Haunted Hamilton or Haunted Hospitals or any of those other books I've written, you can request them. They're most likely not going to be in stock at a local bookstore, but you can always
Hmm.
request them. You can request them from the library, ebook and print,
Oh,
and
wow.
some of my fiction in particular are also available in audiobook. And that helps an author too. You can get the book for free, and that helps me because it gets the book into the library, and then potentially other people discover it. So the most of
That's
my
great.
books, pretty much all of them, should be available through your local public library. If they don't have them already, they can get them.
That's great. Great suggestion too. Yeah. So you have many ways, folks, to get your hands on these. So that is awesome. On your website, can they see the different? Is there a
Yeah.
list of the work that you?
Yeah, I've
Okay,
got a
perfect.
list of the various 35 odd books that I have available. My Canadian Werewolf series, my horror story collections, some of my
Perfect.
thriller and horror novels, and then the True Ghost Story books as well.
That's great. Mark, thanks again for all of this. And happy almost Halloween to everybody out there. Thank you all for joining us today. And if you've enjoyed this kind of topic, we're always going to do something varied and different. Do us a favor. Go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, and tell somebody about us. But other than that, as we wrap up and flick off the lights here for the episode, remember, there's a lot of strange and unexpected in our reality. So always keep your eyes, ears, and minds open. And until next time, stay safe. Thanks, Mark.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you for listening to High Strangeness. This was a glance at some of the strange that exists in our reality.